I woke up to the sound of sirens wailing outside my window, the kind of noise that rips you from a deep sleep and leaves you gasping for air. It was 3 a.m., and the world outside was a blur of red and blue lights dancing across the walls of my bedroom. I lived in a quiet neighborhood, the kind where nothing ever happens, so the commotion was as unusual as it was unsettling. I threw on a sweater and rushed downstairs, my heart pounding in my chest. As I stepped outside, the cold night air hit me like a slap in the face. The scene was chaotic. Neighbors in their pajamas, huddled together, whispering and pointing towards the house next door. That's when I saw him. Jake, my best friend since childhood, being led out of his house in handcuffs. His eyes met mine for a brief moment, and in that split second, I saw a mix of fear, shame, and something else. Something I couldn't quite place. The cops pushed him into the back of a squad car, and just like that, he was gone. I stood there, frozen, as the sirens faded into the distance. What the hell just happened? Jake and I had been inseparable since we were kids. We grew up together, shared every secret, every dream, every fear. He was the one person who knew me better than anyone else, including the fact that I was gay. A secret I kept hidden from the rest of the world. But Jake? He was always the straight-laced, rule-following type. Seeing him in handcuffs was like watching a unicorn turn into a dragon. It just didn't make sense. I spent the rest of the night pacing around my room, trying to piece together what could have led to this. Jake had been acting strange lately, distant even. He'd cancel plans at the last minute, disappear for hours without explanation, and whenever I asked, he'd just brush it off with a vague, "It's nothing. Don't worry about it." But I did worry. I worried a lot. And now, seeing him taken away like that, I knew something was seriously wrong. The next morning, I found out what had happened. Jake had been arrested for hacking into the school's database and changing his grades. It was a shocking revelation, but what was even more shocking was the reason behind it. Jake had been struggling with his own secret. He was failing his classes, and the pressure to keep up appearances had become too much. He confessed everything to me in a tearful phone call from the police station. "I couldn't tell you, Alex," he said, his voice breaking. "I didn't want you to think less of me. But there was more. Much more." As Jake poured out his heart, he revealed something that changed everything. "Alex, there's something else I need to tell you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been in love with you for years. I just never had the courage to say it." The words hung in the air, heavy and profound. I was stunned, speechless. Jake, my best friend, the person I thought I knew inside out, had been hiding this from me all along. And in that moment, as the weight of his confession settled over me, I realized that the day he finally told me he loved me changed everything. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. I visited Jake at the police station as often as they would let me, and each time we talked for hours. It was like a dam had broken, and all the things we had never said to each other came pouring out. Jake told me about the nights he spent awake, wrestling with his feelings, afraid of what they meant. He told me about the times he wanted to reach out and hold my hand, but held back, scared of ruining our friendship. And I listened, my heart aching for him, for us, for all the time we had lost. Meanwhile, I was grappling with my own feelings. I had always known I was gay, but I had never allowed myself to think of Jake that way. He was my best friend, my confidant, my rock. But now, knowing that he felt this way, it was like a switch had been flipped. I started seeing him in a new light, and it was both exhilarating and terrifying. I found myself replaying our conversations in my head, looking for signs, for moments where his feelings had slipped through. And there were plenty. The way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention, the way he always found an excuse to touch me, the way he lit up when I walked into a room. How had I missed all this? But there was a bigger issue at hand. Jake was in serious trouble. The school was pressing charges, and his future hung in the balance. I knew I had to do something, anything, to help him. I started talking to lawyers, to the school board, to anyone who would listen. I became his advocate, his champion, his lifeline to the outside world. And in the process, I found a strength I never knew I had. I was no longer just Alex, the quiet, unassuming guy next door. I was Alex, the fierce, the determined, the one who would stop at nothing to save the person he loved. Yes, I loved him. It hit me one day as I was leaving the police station. Jake had been talking about the future, about how uncertain it all was, and I had reached out, taken his hand, and promised him that no matter what, we would face it together. And in that moment I knew I loved him, not just as a friend, but as something more, something deeper. And it was a love that was willing to fight, to struggle, to endure. But just as I was coming to terms with my feelings, another bombshell dropped. The prosecutor on Jake's case was offering a deal. If Jake pleaded guilty and agreed to testify against the group of hackers he had been working with, he would get a reduced sentence. But there was a catch. The group Jake had been involved with was not just any group. It was a ring of hackers known for their ruthless tactics, and by testifying against them, Jake would be putting a target on his back. The news left me reeling. How had Jake gotten mixed up with people like this? And more importantly, how could I protect him from the storm that was about to come our way? The day he finally told me he loved me changed everything, and now our love story was turning into a fight for survival. As Jake's court date loomed closer, our lives became a tangled web of legal jargon, whispered threats, and stolen moments of tenderness. I remember one afternoon, after a particularly grueling meeting with the lawyers, we found ourselves alone in the visiting room. Jake looked so vulnerable, his eyes filled with a mix of fear and longing. I reached out, took his hand, and for the first time I said the words out loud. I love you, Jake. I love you, and we're going to get through this together. His eyes welled up, and in that moment, amidst the stark reality of our situation, we found a sliver of happiness. But the world outside was far from forgiving. News of Jake's arrest and his involvement with the hacker group had spread like wildfire. Our once quiet neighborhood was now a hub of whispers and judgmental stares. People who had known us since we were kids suddenly looked at us with suspicion and contempt. It was a harsh reminder of how quickly people can turn on you when you're down. But I didn't care. I stood by Jake, unwavering, ready to face whatever came our way. The day of the hearing arrived, and the courtroom was a sea of tense faces. Jake's parents sat stoically, their expressions a mix of disappointment and worry. My heart ached for them, for the pain they were going through. But I also knew that Jake needed me now more than ever. As he took the stand, his voice steady but his hands shaking, he recounted his involvement with the hackers. He spoke of the pressure, the fear, the desperation that had led him down this path. And then, he did something that left the entire courtroom in stunned silence. He looked directly at me and said, I did it because I was afraid of losing the one person who meant the world to me. I was afraid of losing Alex. The room erupted in murmurs, and I felt a lump form in my throat. Jake had just publicly declared his love for me, in front of everyone. It was a moment of raw, unfiltered honesty, and it changed everything. The judge, a stern-looking woman with piercing eyes, looked at Jake and then at me. She saw the truth in our eyes, the depth of our feelings, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of understanding in her gaze. But the legal system is a cold, unyielding machine. Despite Jake's heartfelt confession, the prosecutor pushed for a harsh sentence, citing the severity of the crimes and the need for justice. The room felt like it was closing in on us, the air thick with tension. And then, just as the judge was about to deliver her verdict, something unexpected happened. A man stood up from the back of the courtroom, his face obscured by a hood. He walked towards the stand, his steps measured and deliberate. As he reached the front, he pulled back his hood, revealing a face that sent a shiver down my spine. It was one of the hackers Jake had been working with, and he had a message that would change the course of our lives forever. Your Honor, he began, his voice calm but commanding. I have information that could change the outcome of this case. But before I reveal it, I need assurance that Jake and Alex will be protected. The room fell silent, the air thick with anticipation. The judge looked at the man, her expression unreadable. And then, she nodded, signaling for him to continue. The day Jake finally told me he loved me changed everything. And now, Our love story was taking yet another unexpected turn. The hacker revealed that Jake had been coerced into joining their group, that he had been threatened and manipulated into doing their bidding. He presented evidence, emails, messages, recordings, that painted a picture of a young man trapped in a web of deceit and fear. The courtroom listened in stunned silence as the truth unfolded, layer by layer. And with each revelation, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for us after all. The judge adjourned the hearing, promising to review the new evidence and reconvene at a later date. As Jake was led away, he looked back at me, his eyes filled with a mix of relief and gratitude. I smiled at him, a silent promise that I would be there, no matter what. And as I walked out of the courtroom, I knew that our journey was far from over. But I also knew that whatever came our way, we would face it together. The day he finally told me he loved me changed everything, and our love story was just beginning. In the weeks that followed, our lives became a whirlwind of legal battles, media scrutiny, and stolen moments of peace. The hacker's testimony had turned the case on its head, and suddenly, Jake was being hailed as a victim rather than a criminal. The public's perception of us shifted dramatically. We were no longer the neighborhood pariahs but symbols of resilience and love. It was surreal, to say the least. One evening, as I sat in my room going through the mountains of legal paperwork, there was a soft knock on my door. I opened it to find Jake standing there, his eyes filled with a mix of exhaustion and hope. He had been released on bail, pending the final verdict, and seeing him there, free and alive, felt like a dream come true. We hugged tightly, holding on to each other as if our lives depended on it. And in that moment, everything else faded away. It was just us, Jake and Alex, against the world. But our newfound freedom came with its own set of challenges. The media was relentless, hounding us for interviews and exclusive stories. Our once quiet neighborhood was now a circus of reporters and camera crews. It was overwhelming, and at times it felt like we were drowning in a sea of attention we never asked for. But through it all, we held on to each other, our love a beacon of light in the storm. One day, as we were walking back from a meeting with the lawyers, a car pulled up beside us. The window rolled down, and a familiar face peered out. It was the hacker who had testified in court, the one who had changed the course of our lives. He looked at us, his expression serious. "You two need to be careful," he said, his voice low. "The group I was part of, they're not happy about what happened in court. They're looking for payback." The words sent a chill down my spine. We had known that testifying against the hackers would come with risks, but hearing it said so bluntly was a stark reminder of the danger we were in. The hacker handed us a small device, explaining that it was a tracker that would alert us if any of the group's members were nearby. "Keep this with you at all times," he said, his eyes filled with genuine concern. "And trust no one." As the car pulled away, Jake and I looked at each other, the weight of our situation settling over us like a dark cloud. But even in the face of such danger, there was a strength in our bond that couldn't be broken. We decided then and there that we wouldn't let fear dictate our lives. We would be careful, yes, but we wouldn't hide. We wouldn't let them win. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, we began to find a semblance of normalcy in our lives. Jake started seeing a therapist to work through the trauma of his ordeal, and I threw myself into advocacy work, using our story to raise awareness about the pressures young people face and the dangers of cybercrime. It was healing, in a way, to turn our pain into something positive. But the threat of the hacker group was always there, lurking in the shadows. We lived with a constant sense of unease, always looking over our shoulders, always wondering if today would be the day they struck. It was a tense, exhausting way to live, but we did it together. And in those moments of fear and uncertainty, we found solace in each other's arms, our love a fortress against the storm. One night, as we lay in bed, Jake turned to me, his eyes filled with a mix of love and determination. "No matter what happens, Alex," he said, his voice steady, "I want you to know that I love you, and I will always fight for us." I looked into his eyes, seeing the strength and resilience that had carried us through so much. And I knew, without a doubt, that I would do the same. The day he finally told me he loved me changed everything, and our love story was a testament to that change. A testament to the power of love in the face of adversity. The final court hearing arrived with a flurry of nervous energy. The media circus outside the courthouse was overwhelming, but Jake and I walked in hand, our heads held high. We had faced so much together, and this was just one more hurdle to overcome. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled with reporters, lawyers, and curious onlookers. The air was thick with anticipation, and as we took our seats, I could feel the weight of everyone's gaze on us. The judge entered, her expression stern and unreadable. She called the court to order, and the room fell silent. The prosecutor and our defense lawyer presented their final arguments, each painting a vastly different picture of Jake and the events that had led us here. But through it all, Jake and I sat steadfast, our hands clasped tightly together, a silent promise that no matter what, we would face this together. The judge listened intently, her eyes flicking between the lawyers and the mountains of evidence before her. And then, finally, it was time for her to deliver the verdict. The room held its breath as she began to speak, her voice clear and commanding. "This case has been a complex and challenging one," she said, her eyes scanning the courtroom. "It has brought to light issues of coercion, manipulation, and the devastating effects of peer pressure. It has also shown us the power of love and resilience in the face of adversity." She turned her gaze to Jake, her expression softening slightly. "Jake, you have been through an ordeal that no young person should ever have to face. You were manipulated, threatened, and coerced into actions that were not of your own volition. And yet, despite all this, you have shown remarkable courage and strength." The judge paused, her eyes flicking to me before returning to Jake. "The evidence presented has shown that you were not acting out of malice or greed, but out of fear and desperation. And it is clear that you have learned from this experience, growing into a young man of integrity and compassion." She took a deep breath, and the room seemed to lean in, waiting for her final words. "Therefore, it is the decision of this court that you be acquitted of all charges. You are free to go, Jake, and I wish you both the best of luck in your future together." The courtroom erupted in a mix of gasps and cheers. Jake and I looked at each other, tears of relief and joy streaming down our faces. We had done it. We had fought and we had won. As we stood to leave, the room around us a blur of congratulations and well wishes, I knew that this was just the beginning of our journey together. In the months that followed, Jake and I began to rebuild our lives. We moved to a new city, eager to leave behind the memories of our ordeal and start fresh. Jake enrolled in college, determined to make up for lost time and pursue his dreams. I threw myself into my advocacy work, using our story to inspire and help others. Together, we built a life filled with love, laughter, and a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought us here. But our story doesn't end here. Life is full of twists and turns, and who knows what the future holds for us. What I do know is this: no matter what comes our way, we will face it together. Because the day Jake finally told me he loved me changed everything. Changed us, it changed our lives, and it changed the way we see the world. And so, as we look to the future, hand in hand and hearts intertwined, we invite you to join us on this journey. Subscribe to our channel, watch our videos, and comment down below with your favorite part of our story. Because this is more than just our love story. It's a testament to the power of love, resilience, and the unbreakable bond between two people who refuse to give up on each other. Thank you for being a part of our journey. Here's to love, to courage, and to the adventures that await us all. Until next time, stay brave, stay true, and always fight for the ones you love.